Hello everyone, and welcome to a nostalgic throwback, in more ways than one. Demon's Souls came out in 2009, Demon's Souls Remake came out in 2020, and my last Soulsborne boss ranking came out in 2024. All these random years are now coming together in 2025 for a boss ranking video. Every Demon's Souls Remake boss ranked from easiest to hardest. I did play the original Demon's Souls once back in 2018, and I had a pretty bad time, largely because of the jank and poorly explained mechanics like world tendency, but my playthrough of Remake this time around was actually quite fun. Granted, there was no shortage of frustration from both the levels and the bosses, this is a Soulsborne game after all, but I could appreciate this game a lot more now that I'm 7 years older, 7 years wiser, and Remake provided some quality of life changes. I remember thinking in my original playthrough that the bosses were either frustratingly hard or laughably easy, and that was when I was a much worse gamer than I am now. So going in, I was very curious to see how they held up this time around. There will be no big explanations of Demon's Souls mechanics in this video. If you're watching, I'm going to assume that you know the basics, but I will explain my build ahead of time. Strength focused, first using the longsword, then the bastard sword, then the Dragonbone Smasher, relying on overwhelming damage and as few hits as possible, and relying on dodging as my defense, because I could barely wear any armor before my carry weight meant I started fat rolling. Also, I made sure to kill myself in the Nexus after every boss, because I'm not having body form deaths ruin my world tendency down to pure black. Now, with all that said, let's finally begin the ranking. Number 18, True King Allant. This is not an entry that needs elaboration. The consensus easiest boss in all of FromSoft's game history, rivaled only by Soldier of God, Rick. At least this boss can hit me, not that it hurts hard enough to make me worry. Yes, Allant being like this makes narrative sense, but this isn't a ranking of a boss's lore, it's ranking the challenge. And this disgusting blob monster doesn't have any. Number 17, Phalanx. I was having a hard time at the start of my Demon's Souls playthrough, trying to make my way through 1-1, but I knew that at the end of this gauntlet was an easy boss. Phalanx is the first true boss in the Soulsborne franchise, the first one that you need to beat to progress, and it's a highlight for the Demon's Souls boss design philosophy. These bosses are largely gimmick based, and the gimmick of Phalanx is burn them all. Phalanx is protected by a horde of smaller blobs with shields and spears, you know, like a phalanx, and you can't hit the actual boss until you clear them out enough. This is normally tricky, but the area of 1-1 subtly tells you that the secret is fire, hence the amount of firebombs and pine resin that you can find. These blobs shrivel up in the face of fire, so I made sure to exploit that weakness. Granted, the boss can defend itself through its minions by poking you with spears and throwing those spears, but they don't do a lot of damage even for an unleveled character, and the enemies are slow enough for you to munch on grass to heal. It's even easier in the remake because of the enhanced visual clarity. Phalanx is a good learning tool for the philosophy of this entire game, and the challenge level isn't particularly high either. Number 16, Leechmonger. I killed this boss in 5 hits and I'm not sorry about it. Leechmonger is in 5-1, the first area of the Valley of Defilement. Anyone who knows Demon's Souls knows that this area absolutely sucks, especially when you're relatively new to the game, or you're using a big slow weapon that gets stuck on walls. I left the 5th Archstone for last, and was so glad to make it to Leechmonger because I just knew I was going to win. I just wasn't aware how quickly. I stood right in front of him for at least 30 seconds, and I don't think I was threatened for a single moment, which is something I can't say about every other boss on this list above him. Leechmonger has attacks, and can drain your health with leeches, but it didn't do any of that to me because I guess it was on its day off. On subsequent playthroughs, perhaps Leechmonger will go up, but I won't be taking this boss on early anytime soon. Number 15, Adjudicator. Like 1-1, my struggles through 4-1 were done in the hopes that I could just make it to the Adjudicator, an easy boss that I knew I could crush. It wasn't as easy as I expected, but it was still about as easy as I'd hoped. That came down to 2 factors. For one, on the upper floor, the Adjudicator can hit you about as fast as you can stand back up and heal, so do yourself a favor and dive for the bottom floor straight away. 2. This man-bird thing has a surprisingly girthy health bar, or maybe not surprisingly when you consider the girth of his belly. Basically, the Adjudicator is very into piercings, and he got a massive one put in his side. I'm not normally one to judge fashion choices, but this seems tactically flawed, because attacking this piercing will make the boss fall over after a few hits, and that gives you a chance to attack the bird on the head, which is the only thing that takes damage. Good thing too, because the boss is too fat to take damage any other way, and that belly is great at deflecting bastard sword swings that aren't exactly precise. The Adjudicator took a lot more knockdowns than I expected to beat, but that's because of my mediocre damage, and the fact that I still won anyway shows that he's very survivable, because his wind-ups for his attacks are ridiculously long. I would have to dodge 20 attacks from any Elden Ring boss in the same time as I have to dodge one from this big man. If it hits you, it hurts, but it very rarely hits you unless you actively refuse to dodge, so Adjudicator is comfortable in the bottom tier of Demon Souls difficulty. Number 14, the Armor Spider. This is my biggest surprise in Demon Souls Remake in terms of bosses. My first experience with this boss in 2018 on the PS3 was Death, 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 and Damnation. I hated this boss more than the Bed of Chaos or Ludenzalen. When I went into Stonefang Tunnel in the remake and finally made it to the spider, I was pleasantly surprised by both how much easier it was and how much more enjoyable it was. Granted, it's still only a 5 out of 10 boss, but that's a big step up from the negative 5 out of 10 it was before. I think I got lucky with the AI, because the main threatening attack of this spider, the oil spit, was only done once. The spider sets the entire tunnel ablaze, making you need to run to the rear wall or get burnt. It then spits webs at you as you make your way down towards it, which disables your rolling and slows down your movement speed, but when you get close enough it swaps to melee swipes with its front legs. I was able to dodge the webs pretty easily, and nothing it did up close was very challenging. In the remake, it's very easy to see when it attacks and what it's doing, so roll through and beat the spider to death like the good Australian that you are. I'm not sure what exactly made the spider so easy, but I'm very grateful for that because I don't want to repeat the experiences of long ago. Number 13, Maiden Estrella. Maiden Estrella is more of a story moment than a proper boss fight, given the only true combat section is against an NPC fighter, Garl Vinland. I'll admit, he hit me quite hard, but I was the one giving him the chance to do so, otherwise I'd have one-cycled him and flattened him with the Dragon Bone Smasher. Once I was healed up, I smashed him before he could smash me, and Maiden Estrella surrendered her demon soul to me. Vinland is serious business, but this was the third to last boss I fought in my playthrough, so I was ready for him in terms of build and experience. Granted, I could have taken the other routes to victory, ranged attacks from afar or trying to traverse the Plague Swamp, but I'm not silly, so I didn't do that, at least not this time around. If I had a different melee weapon, Garland would no doubt have put up a better fight, but that'll have to be a fight for the future, and not a fight for this ranking. Number 12, the Old Hero. I got the Thief's Ring this playthrough. That should tell you how this fight went. The Old Hero has a huge sword and a very unique mechanic. He's blind and can track you by sound, your footsteps, your attacks, and by the breaking pottery in the arena. If he gets an idea of your location, he'll swing that big sword, and when it hits quite hard. However, the Thief's Ring makes it harder for enemies to detect you. It's one of the most useful items in Demon Souls, and that usefulness continues here. The Old Hero couldn't find me no matter how many hints I dropped. I basically just walked right up to him from behind, hit him a few times, and ran away when he tried to counter. Granted, I did take a few shots, but healing is easy because of the large amounts of downtime this fight gives you while he's searching, and his attacks really are nothing unique or difficult to dodge. This is a great idea for a boss fight, but sadly not one that carries much difficulty if you use the proper tools. Number 11, the Old Monk. From one old boss to another, and old is an apt word because this boss's prime is long behind it. In times long ago, you'd be engaging in epic PvP duels to claim an archdemon's soul. In today's day and age, in both the original and the remake, you'll be fighting an NPC. We've fought NPCs in this game before, and this one is really no different. He wields a claw and a shield, and is flanked by respawning soul arrows. He attacks quickly and tries to apply pressure to you, but it's nothing you can't deal with. Look, after the boss I just fought to get here, the Old Monk wasn't anything scary. The NPC has decent health and decent damage, but it was well balanced for my power level at this point in the game. Just watch out for the parry. That being said, he only managed to do this once, so keep your greed in check and you'll slay the second easiest archdemon in the game. Number 10, the Storm King. Cracking into the top 10 already, we have another archdemon, and it's another gimmick fight. What a curious pattern with these archdemons. I'd say that the Storm King is the boss that benefits the most from the remake, at least in terms of making the fight better, rather than making it less awful, like in the case of Armor Spider. This giant flying stingray commands an army of smaller stingray minions, and you need to kill all of them to attract the leader's attention. The rays all fire projectiles at you, with the king firing a lot more, and these attacks do hurt, but they can be reasonably avoided thanks to the clearer visual tells if you're paying attention. Now, you may have noticed that I'm a melee build with no spells and no bow, so how am I meant to kill these things? Thankfully, there's a handy tool for that just over here. Oh, hang on. No, my inventory's full. Hold up, let me just arrange this, send this back to the main hub, and... okay, there we go. The Storm Ruler, in its original form, albeit in full remake glory. It takes your entire stamina bar, and in exchange it delivers a large slash of wind through the air, taking out anything in its path. This is how you damage the boss, first by destroying the minions, and then by attacking the king. Granted, sometimes hitting the king is more a matter of luck than skill unless you stand right under him or right in front of him, but it doesn't take that many hits to kill the boss in between dodging flurries of storm arrows. Granted, I did take a loss to this boss from the projectiles, but that was my own fault for being greedy. Using appropriate cover and timing will give you a much easier time slaying the Storm King. Number 9, the Dirty Colossus. On paper, the Dirty Colossus isn't that hard. I think I was just bad at fighting this thing, because I actually got hit quite a lot by his attacks. It swings its arms around wildly, and fires clumps of filth at you in bursts, and I took a lot of hits. Granted, I was trying to let the boss actually show off its mechanics for footage purposes, but I'm not willing to use that as an excuse. My weapon was big, slow, and I got caught between wind-ups for my swings. Each time you get hit, you get covered in dirt that saps your health away, but you can cleanse yourself by standing near the torches around the arena. At least I think you can do that. The thing about the Dirty Colossus is, even though I got smacked around quite a lot, I never felt truly threatened. I never once thought, okay, time to lock in, this is dangerous, I need to win this now. I instead thought, well, I have grass to spare. This is one of the last bosses I fought because I hate 5-2 with a passion. And believe me, if you can make it through the Swamp of Sorrow, you can make it through the Dirty Colossus. Number 8, the Tutorial Vanguard. Let's keep this quick. I barely chipped his health bar before he killed me. It's not because he has a hard moveset, far from it. Strafing around him is largely threat-free. Better yet for you if he uses the butt slam attack more often than not, it gives you ample time to get in damage while he recovers. What holds the Vanguard up is his ability to kill you in 1 or 2 hits, and the fact that you only get a single try at him, with slow healing provided by basic early game grass. Vanguard isn't that strong, you're just really weak, as proven by the much easier rematch in 4-1. I even have confidence in my ability to beat him at the tutorial strength level, but you only get 1 shot per playthrough. I'll go back and brute force a win against him someday, but for now, he can have a spot in the top 10, largely down to his circumstances rather than his talent. Number 7, the Fool's Idol. This is easily the biggest controversial pick on the list. Everyone else that I know proclaims this boss as stupidly easy, and maybe they're right. But this was the 3rd boss that I fought in my playthrough, after the Phalanx and the Tower Knight, and I was going for the optional trophy where you can't hit a single clone. This led to me standing around and dodging a lot so I could try to identify the real idol, and that led to me getting stuck in the magical floor traps more often than not. I'm generally good at video games, but remembering the placement of those invisible land traps was not an aspect I was strong at. I got stuck, I got barraged by magic attacks, and the grass I had on me wasn't strong enough to out-heal the damage. Perhaps I fought her too early, but 3-1 was the only area after 1-2 that I felt like I could handle where it wasn't too hard for me to get through, so here I was. It's not like the Fool's Idol is particularly hard, she just fires soul arrows, spawns clones, and does nothing when you get up close, but I got outworked by her simple setup because the clones provide such a large barrage of magical attacks. It's shameful, but now that the optional trophy is mine, future fights will be much simpler. Also, make sure to kill the liar. I feel like that's an important thing to note. Demon Souls rewards exploration. Number 6, Penetrator. In a game filled with bosses focused on creativity and gimmicks over rhythm and swordplay, Penetrator stands out as a great first draft for the future knight-type fights we love in Fromsoftwares' catalogue. For the record, I fought Penetrator alone without Bjorn, as I always try to fight these bosses solo for ranking purposes. The Penetrator has a sword, obviously, and he uses it well. He proves his proficiency as a Penetrator within seconds of us meeting him in a cutscene, and then tries to give us a hands-on experience as to why he earned that nickname. There's not really much to talk about in this fight aside from him being good at slashing and stabbing with his blade. My Dragonbone Smasher was capable of killing him in a small amount of hits, but landing those in between his own flurries was difficult, seeing as any damage would interrupt my own swings. It became a tricky dance of timing, which was something I enjoyed, a challenge yet not too demanding. I left Penetrator for after I'd beaten every other Archdemon, so I was practically at my strongest here aside from a couple points missing of stamina and health, and he still put up a good fight against me and my powerful weapon. I fought Renala, Soul of Cinder, Pontiff Sullivan, sword-wielding bosses that are far faster and far more complicated than the Penetrator, so my fight was a mixture of, I've dealt with far worse than you, and Huh, I've fought far worse than you and you're still making me put in effort. That's partially down to Demon Souls gameplay clunk, and partially down to Penetrator just being a mechanically good fight. Number 5, the Tower Knight. Continuing our fight through Boletaria, or rather going backwards, we find the previous boss of the Penetrator. The Tower Knight is a large and intimidating foe, but this mountain of a man can be brought down to his back through cunning strategy. By strategy, I mean nipping at his heels until he falls over and then you can smack him in the head, because I guess his helmet is made out of paper mache. There are archers all around the arena firing at you on occasion, so taking them out in advance is the smart play. I chose not to do this because there's an optional trophy you get for killing the knight while leaving the archers alone, and I found that they were hardly a factor anyway. I got shot maybe 3 times over all my attempts. Maybe it was because I was always positioned towards the fog gate. Anyways, the Tower Knight proved difficult to me for 3 main reasons. The first of which being he was my first boss after the Phalanx, so I was using low end gear with low end stats. This meant low damage with my weapon, and I had to choose between fat rolling with armored protection or fast rolling with a squishier health bar. The second were his AoE attacks. I wasn't too worried about his lance thrusts, I could see them coming and dodge to the side, but his shield slams were severely damaging, nearly one-shotting me every time. I eventually learned his tells and how to identify the incoming threats, you know, as you do in a boss fight, but I was still liable to have near misses or just straight up get flattened. The third was his constant positioning. If you knock the Tower Knight down and his head gets stuck in a wall, you miss your chance for notable damage, so I spent a lot longer than usual just trying to get him to move away from the walls for when I sent him tumbling over. There are several ways I could have made him easier. A better weapon, killing the archers, saving him for later, but that's not the experience I had, and that's why the Tower Knight ended up so high on the list. Number 4, the Dragon God. This fight is such a letdown. I understand that creating a straight up fight with a colossal dragon on the PS3 in 2009 in a first attempt at a new game formula from a smaller studio would have been basically impossible, but this was not a good substitution. The Dragon God is a stealth fight, avoiding the gaze of a giant monster as you make your way to 2 different crossbows in the arena. If you're seen, you get one shot no matter what by a punch, so hiding behind various pillars to avoid his gaze along the way is necessary. Frankly, I had no idea if some of these pillars were safe to hide behind, meaning my victory partially came down to getting lucky, I feel. I didn't really feel like I did much differently in my successful attempt compared to the deaths that I had. When it comes to things that were within my control, my bastard sword was a great choice. There is rubble in your path that must be broken, a dangerous and time-consuming prospect for a smaller weapon, seeing as you'll be exposed to his gaze for a longer time, but this was a paltry matter for my bigger blade. I don't consider the Dragon Bone Smasher as a valid option here because of the world tendency system being obtuse. If the player is wise enough to get rid of body form in the Nexus every time, they'll still only reach the required pure white tendency after killing all 3 bosses in Stonefang Tunnel, including the Dragon God, meaning you can't use the Dragon Bone Smasher to help you fight the Dragon God. After setting off the first ballista, I managed to make it to the second one on my first try, while being unsure of where to hide and just throwing caution to the wind. Frankly, it seemed as if the dragon wasn't even looking for me at all. The final phase, if you can call it that, was a tense balancing act for me. As in, I needed to balance damage from my bastard sword so I could land the final hit with the Hands of God weapon to get an optional trophy. What, did you expect me to say that dodging bad breath was difficult? This is a near guaranteed win. The difficulty of killing the Dragon God feels so randomized, so on a better day he may be lower on the list, and on the worst day he could be number 1. For today, it reaches number 4, as the worst and hardest gimmick boss on the list. From this point out, we've got nothing but pure combat ahead. Number 3, Flame Lurker. Oh, look at me, I'm so original. My top 3 boss choices for this ranking are so unique. What can I say? Regardless of build and player experience, a hard boss is hard. Everyone respects Melania, everyone fears Promised Consort Radahn, and everyone realizes that the top 3 hardest bosses in Demon Souls, minus the Dragon God on a bad day, are these 3 guys. But why is Flame Lurker only the 3rd hardest? Well, I had the easiest time with him. Wow, you've just figured out the concept of a difficulty ranking there, Matt. Well done. It took me 3 tries to defeat Flame Lurker. Yes, only 3, against one of the hardest bosses in the game. I died more to Fool's Idol and to the Tower Knight. I didn't even have access to sticky white slime in these attempts. I used it all on the spider and I didn't know where to get more, so I just smacked him with my bastard sword over and over. Did I get lucky? Was I over leveled? I really have no idea. None of his attacks were anything I hadn't seen before, in the literal sense because I fought him before, and the figurative sense, as in his moves are all kind of basic. Dodging them wasn't anything taxing either, with one exception. His attack where he slams down for a fiery AoE gave me some trouble, because my dodge only got me to the edge of its range, not quite enough to avoid getting burnt. When I started rolling into and around this attack, rather than try to go directly backwards, it became a lot more manageable. Everything else, his various swipes and slams, his forward pressure, it was all avoidable with spacing and being careful with how I timed my attacks. If I got hit, I was hurt, but grass exists and I had plenty. Honestly, the two deaths I had were explainable. The first because I was relearning his moves after 7 years between fights, and the second because I got stuck in a corner behind a pillar. As long as you fight him while avoiding getting stuck in corners, you may have a much easier time. Flamelurker earned my respect. He is tough, but I was expecting a much more powerful enemy given his reputation. I'm not about to complain though. I can see him being a lot harder on different playthroughs, when his AI actually feels like showing up to work. Number 2, False King Allant. This guy is a true final boss. Out of every boss in the game, this was the only one that brought a challenge comparable to later fights in the series, for the right reasons. His sword swings are fast and come in combinations. The slashes of wind make him a threat at range and disrupt your healing moments, and he can track your movements far better than you'd think. He can also close distance with ease, with lunges and leaps. In truth, he feels like he could fit right into Dark Souls 3, hopefully with less clunky mechanics for both him and yourself. I faced him at my strongest, and he still gave me the business on multiple attempts. I worried that I'd become too strong for bosses once I got the Dragonbone Smasher, after I destroyed Leechmonger, Dirty Colossus, and Penetrator fell without too much trouble. But no, Allant is powerful enough to keep up with and surpass you at your strongest. I had a lot of trouble with his leaping slash attack, but rolling into it rather than away from it proved to be a good counter. The slowness of the Dragonbone Smasher proved to be a detriment here. I often got interrupted before I could land a swing, and he had enough health to tank a lot of my attacks. Of course, I need to mention the most unique attack that Allant has, the Soul Sucker. He can drain an entire soul level from you. I got hit by this grab 3 times, once on one attempt and twice on another attempt. The most hilarious part is that on the 3rd Soul Suck, he'd taken away enough of my endurance that he took away my carry weight and reduced me to fat rolling. Of course I died soon after. Do you think I can avoid this kind of speed by rolling at the speed of a turtle? Rather than re-leveling, I just took off my gloves to get my roll speed back, and got back in there for more battle, claiming victory despite my lessened power. This is a brutal mechanic, but honestly I kind of love it, seeing as it has a unique tell, so it's easy to avoid, and it's just so unique. That's Demon Souls for you, baby. Truly the worst part about my boss fight experiences was when I was feasting on buffs before I went through the fog, and accidentally triggered his elevator to go back down to the ground floor, meaning I was stuck there for over a minute, doing nothing, and then I had to go all the way back up. Maddening stuff. False King Allant is a great boss, my favorite in the game, and he's a true challenge, the hardest boss in the game for actually good reasons. That's the second time I've said something like that, so let's just get the number 1 out of the way. Number 1, Man-Eaters. Stupid boss, stupid design, stupid arena, awful. 0 out of 10. Those are my initial notes on this boss, the notes that I write down after every boss so I know what to write for the boss ranking. And frankly, I don't feel like adding anything else. I despise these gargoyle wannabe fucks. Man-Eaters was relatively one of the first bosses I fought. I'd only beaten Phalanx, Tower Knight, Armor Spider, Educator, and Fool's Idol beforehand, so perhaps I was coming in a bit under-leveled. But frankly, my stats weren't the main issue, because gravity doesn't give a damn about your stats. Getting knocked off a ledge in a boss fight is never fun, and that's what these bastards love to do. Every attack they do has knockback, and you fight them on a thin walkway. When you fight the Man-Eaters, you need to be constantly aware of your positioning to avoid getting instantly killed by even a light attack. The Man-Eaters don't even have that bad of a moveset. Their punches can be outspaced, their charges have a tell, their soul arrows are slow, the magical blasts are a bit annoying but not that bad, and their power-up attack can be interrupted through damage. You can even cut off the tails to eliminate some of their moveset. It's just the arena, elevating their difficulty from mid-tier to god-tier, because your health bar can't withstand endless falling no matter how much you level. The fact they gang up on you is a nightmare, mainly because of the knockback. I can run around the fire in the center to try to break them up, and sprint up and down the length of the arena to find opportunities to heal, but it's not unlikely that they'll double team me to kill me, or get lucky and knock me off the edge. I know what you're meant to do. You're meant to melt the first one's health bar before the second one shows up, giving you an easier fight. but the problem is getting the Maneater low enough to spawn the second one, and then the first one flies up out of your melee range for ages, so you can't damage it further before its friend shows up. This AI is ridiculous with how often it just chooses to fly around and do nothing. I spent a lot of time in each attempt in this fight just waiting for something to happen, and whenever it did, it usually got me killed via bullshit. I hate this fight. But with all that said, maybe this boss could actually be good. If they updated the AI, and gave you a wider space to fight on, and placed it early on in the game, maybe even guarding a bell or something, maybe that boss would be regarded as one of the better fights in whatever game that was. And then, maybe they could make another version years later, with way more enemies and worse in every way. And then another version with massive gargoyles and poison. No, that just sounds silly. I don't think that's a good idea at all. Once I killed the Maneaters, everything else in Demon's Souls was far, far easier, and I found it a much more fun experience. But they are one hell of a roadblock. They're an awful roadblock, and thus, the Maneaters are my hardest boss in Demon's Souls Remake. And that's the list. Honestly, I had a better time with this game than I was expecting. Demon's Souls is not a boss-focused game like Dark Souls 3 or Elden Ring. Instead, this game has perhaps the greatest level design in the Souls series, not including the interconnectivity of Bloodborne and Dark Souls 1. Even I, as a more boss-focused player, can appreciate the care and focus put into the worlds and areas, and exploring them proved quite fun whenever I wasn't getting angry. So, whenever I wasn't in the 5th Archstone. For example, the Tower of Latria is absolutely fantastic, one of the greatest examples of an area in the entire series. The bosses, on the other hand, are largely experimental, focusing on gimmicks that you need to figure out, leading to reduced difficulty. Maybe this was the initial idea for the Souls series, more in-depth strategy and puzzle solving for the bosses, over quick-paced dodging and swordplay. I obviously prefer the latter by far, but I can still appreciate the creativity that the boss roster in Demon's Souls has, for better or for worse. I'm glad the legacy of several of these bosses lives on later in the series in better boss design, and I'm glad that the roster of this game still provides a fun time even today. Unlike how I felt after my first playthrough 7 years ago, this time I'd be more than happy to go back in for another playthrough, and I will be doing so, as one day I plan to platinum Demon's Souls, which is about the highest praise I can give a game. And speaking of praise, thank you all for watching this video. It's been a long while since I've ranked Fromsoftware bosses, and frankly, it was quite fun to do. These games lend themselves really well to rankings, of bosses, areas, anything, and I'd love to do more of them. In fact, I plan to. It's been years since I've sat down and played Dark Souls 1, 2 or 3, or Bloodborne for that matter. It's been a year since I dipped into Elden Ring for the DLC, and I've yet to actually properly play Sekiro or Night Rain. I plan to correct that fact over the next few months to within a year, coming along with periodic rankings, concluding with a giant series ranking every boss in the franchise from worst to best. If you guys would like to see that, let me know, and I'd be happy to focus on it more. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. The growth on the channel lately has been amazing, and I hope to prove worthy of the faith that the new subscribers are placing in me. If you think I've earned it, consider checking out my Patreon for sneak peeks, special voting privileges, early access to videos, and perhaps a little bit more. With all that said, I think we're done here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.